The days in camp always bled into each other. Dust, sweat, and the constant rhythm of boots on packed earth. The air tasted of metal and smoke, and every order barked by our commanding officers cut through the silence like a whip. We lived in obedience here, shoulders stiff and eyes sharp, knowing one slip was enough to draw punishment. Some of the men carried it like a badge of honor, but I feared it always. I wasn't the strongest in the unit, but I carried my weight. I didn't mouth off. I didn't question orders. Still, no amount of care can stop a mistake from happening when your hands are trembling with exhaustion. That afternoon, the sun hung like fire over our heads, and sweat stung my eyes as we drilled with rifles. My palms were raw from the endless repetition, and my stomach was hollow from the half rations we'd been given the night before. I told myself to stay focused, to hold on. But focus slipped. My grip faltered. The rifle clattered against the ground, loud as thunder in the stillness. For a moment, I thought maybe no one had noticed. The clang echoed, and every head in the row turned toward me. My stomach sank. I bent down to grab it again, praying for silence, but it was too late. "Soldier!" The voice cut like a blade. I froze before straightening. He was already walking toward me, his boots kicking up the dust. My commanding officer, Captain Rourke. His shadow fell over me long before his body did. The man was carved from stone, tall and broad-shouldered. His uniform pressed crisp even in this wasteland of sweat and grime. He had eyes that missed nothing, and a jaw that never softened, not even when he smiled, which was rare. He was respected, feared, envied, and whispered about. Some said he was brutal. Others said he was fair. I'd never known which to believe, because he terrified me in equal measure. "You think you're playing with toys, soldier?" His voice dropped lower, dead calm, which was worse than yelling. "No, sir," I stammered, gripping the rifle tight now as if I could undo the mistake by holding it perfectly. But the damage was done. His eyes flicked over me, unreadable, before he barked. "Pick up your gear. Tonight you'll sleep separate from the rest of the unit. Discipline is earned, not assumed. Maybe the silence will remind you." There was no appeal, no argument, just orders. The other soldiers' eyes darted to me, some full of pity, some full of amusement. My face burned hotter than the sun. I wanted to vanish, but in the army, humiliation had no place to hide. I swallowed my pride, nodded once and said, "Yes, sir." That night, when the tents were pitched and the camp settled into its rhythm of murmured voices and clinking canteens, I was ordered away from the cluster. My bedroll and gear were dragged to a smaller tent, pitched apart from the others. It was close enough that I could hear the distant laughter of men bonding, but far enough that I couldn't join them. Exile. That's what it felt like. I set my pack down and sat on the thin mat. The canvas walls glowed faint orange from the dying firelight outside. Inside, it smelled of damp earth and canvas, faintly sour from disuse. The silence pressed against me. At first, it was humiliation that gnawed at me. My mistake had been small, trivial, even. Dropping a weapon wasn't uncommon, though rarely forgiven. Why did it have to be me? Why did he have to choose me for this punishment? Every soldier made errors, but Captain Rourke had singled me out. But the longer I sat there, the more something shifted. A strange relief settled over me. For once, I didn't have to hear the endless snores, the muttered curses in the dark, or the stench of 20 men packed into canvas like sardines. The air here was lighter, private. My shame slowly twisted into an unfamiliar comfort. I lay back, staring at the dim outline of the tent ceiling, and let my mind wander. I thought about him, about Captain Rourke. It was dangerous even in thought. He wasn't just a man, he was a fortress. Married, everyone said. A wife back home who sent letters he never read aloud. He never removed his wedding band, even on drills. He was authority itself, untouchable. And yet, there was something about him I couldn't stop noticing. The way his uniform clung to his shoulders. The way his voice cut through silence, not just commanding but magnetic. The way his eyes sometimes lingered a moment too long when they didn't need to. I told myself it was imagination, projection, that admiration for a superior was common enough, and I was just another soldier caught in his orbit. Still, as I lay alone in that tent, I couldn't shake the heat that crept into my chest. I hated him for humiliating me. I feared him for his authority. I envied him for the power he wielded. And yet, beneath it all, something deeper stirred. The camp settled outside, one voice fading after another. The night insects took up their chorus. I curled into my blanket, trying to sleep, but my mind refused to rest. My thoughts circled the same truth. I was angry at him, and drawn to him, both at once. In the silence of my punishment, I realized something I'd never admit aloud. Maybe being apart wasn't punishment at all. Maybe it was the first time I could breathe. And in that fragile stillness, I couldn't help but wonder. Why had he chosen me for this? Out of all the men, why me? The question followed me into uneasy dreams, where his voice still echoed, sharp and low, telling me to remember my place. But the whisper underneath, the one I couldn't name, kept me awake long after. Night fell heavy on the camp. The air cooled but never lost its weight, as though the heat of the day still clung to the earth. Wind rattled the canvas around me, a hollow flapping sound that made the tent feel smaller, lonelier. I lay flat on my back, eyes open, staring at the faint seams above. Every creak, every crunch outside made my body stiffen. I told myself I'd get used to the solitude, that exile wasn't so bad. But in the silence, memories from the drill returned over and over. The clatter of my rifle, the men's eyes on me, his voice cutting through everything. Captain Rourke's face hovered in my mind, stern and unreadable. I shifted restlessly, pulling the thin blanket over me, trying to shut it out. That's when I heard it. A soft scrape against the ground. The sound of boots outside my tent. I held my breath, listening. Maybe it was just a soldier sneaking away to relieve himself. Maybe it was nothing. But then the tent flap stirred, a shadow moving across the thin canvas. My heart slammed into my chest. The flap lifted, and a figure bent low to enter. Moonlight filtered through the gap just long enough for me to recognize him. Captain Rourke. I shot upright, adrenaline flooding me. "Sir." "Quiet," he said, low and sharp. Before I could say anything more, he closed the flap behind him, sealing us inside. The air grew smaller, heavier, like all the oxygen had been pulled away. "What are you?" He cut me off again, kneeling across from me on the mat. "I came for a private talk." His voice carried no warmth. It was clipped, deliberate. But there was something else there, beneath the surface, a heaviness that didn't belong in casual reprimands. I swallowed hard, nodding. My throat felt dry. My mind scrambled for an explanation. Maybe he wanted to lecture me further, to drill the lesson into me with words the way he couldn't in front of the others. But his eyes told me it wasn't just discipline. They locked on mine, unblinking. In the low light, they looked darker, sharper, but alive in a way I hadn't seen before. His knee shifted forward until it brushed mine. The touch was faint, barely there, but it sent a current through me so strong I forgot how to breathe. I froze, pulse racing. My body screamed to pull back, to move away, but I couldn't. He leaned closer, the space between us shrinking. The scent of his uniform, sweat, leather, a faint trace of tobacco, surrounded me. His hand reached out suddenly, closing around my wrist. Firm, not painful but testing, as though he wanted to see how quickly I'd resist, how strong I'd push him away. But I didn't. The seconds stretched, his grip steady. My skin burned where he touched me. I trembled, not with fear, but with something I didn't want to name. His brow furrowed slightly, as though confused. I realized then, he'd expected me to fight, to recoil, to remind him of the line he was crossing. But I didn't move. I lingered, and in that hesitation, in my refusal to resist, something cracked between us. He shifted forward, closer still, his breath brushing my cheek. My chest rose and fell too fast, as though I just finished a sprint. His eyes searched mine, almost desperate, as though waiting for a final cue. My lips parted, not to speak, but because words had abandoned me completely. And then he kissed me. It wasn't tender. It wasn't soft. It was rough, sudden, filled with force and hesitation all at once. His mouth crashed against mine like it was both a command and a confession. Shock bolted through me. This was wrong, so wrong. He was my superior, my commanding officer, a married man. This could destroy us both if anyone knew. I should have pulled away. I should have said, stop. But I didn't. Instead, my body betrayed me. My lips pressed back against his, trembling but hungry. My pulse thundered in my ears, drowning out every rational thought. His hand slid from my wrist to my jaw, thumb brushing against my cheek in a fleeting moment of softness. The kiss deepened, carrying a heat I'd never expected from him, from anyone. I felt caged and free all at once, trapped beneath the weight of his authority but lifted by the raw fire of his desire. When he finally pulled back, his breath was ragged. His eyes burned into mine, filled with something I'd never seen in him before. Something almost vulnerable. I shouldn't have, he muttered, voice hoarse. I didn't answer. My chest heaved, my lips tingled, and my mind spun. I wanted to tell him I agreed, that it was wrong, that this couldn't happen again. But the words didn't come, because deep inside, the truth was louder than denial. I didn't want it to stop. I stared at him, searching for the man who barked orders in daylight, who humiliated me in front of the unit. But he wasn't here now. Here in the tent, with the flaps sealed and the silence pressing around us, he wasn't Captain Rourke, the untouchable officer. He was just a man who had kissed me, and I hadn't resisted. The morning light crept in through the canvas seams, turning the tent a pale, washed-out gray. My eyes opened heavy, my body restless from a night of broken sleep. Every time I drifted off, I jolted awake again, remembering the heat of his mouth against mine, the grip of his hand on my jaw. I sat up quickly, almost afraid he'd still be there. But the space beside me was empty. He had slipped out sometime before dawn, leaving no trace except the pounding in my chest. For a few fragile seconds, I let myself replay it. The way his voice cracked, the way his kiss felt like a command and a confession all at once. But the camp was stirring outside, and reality pressed down hard. By the time I stepped out, boots laced and rifle slung over my shoulder, I was no longer just a man with a secret. I was a soldier under his watch again. And he was Captain Rourke. He stood near the training field, already barking orders at the men. His posture was rigid, face set like stone. When his gaze flicked past me, it was sharp, cutting, as though last night had never happened. Form up. Keep your lines tight. No excuses today. His voice cracked like a whip. I forced myself into position with the others, keeping my expression blank. But my chest tightened with every word. Last night, his lips had pressed against mine like he'd wanted to devour me. This morning, he looked at me like I was just another nameless soldier in the line. The contrast stung more than I'd expected. Throughout drills, I kept stealing glances at him. Each time, I caught nothing. Just cold professionalism, the captain everyone respected and feared. But once, only once, our eyes locked longer than they should have. His mouth tightened, his gaze burning into me before he turned away, shouting another order. It was enough to remind me it hadn't been a dream. Enough to tell me the silence was deliberate. By the time the sun set, exhaustion pulled at my body, but sleep was impossible. I lay in my tent again, staring at the ceiling seams, every muscle wound tight. My mind ran in circles. Did he regret it? Would he come again? Did I even want him to? The answer pulsed through me before I could stop it. Yes. When the flap rustled hours later, my breath caught. He stepped in, crouched low, and closed the entrance behind him. His face was unreadable in the dim glow, but the weight of his presence filled the space. I sat up, waiting for him to speak. Maybe he would scold me, warn me never to mention it, insist last night was a mistake. My pulse hammered with dread and anticipation all at once. But he said nothing. He crossed the short space between us and sank to his knees in front of me. His hand found my shoulder, rough and deliberate, pushing me back against the mat. The silence between us roared louder than any words. I should have said something, anything, but when his body pressed close, all thought scattered. His mouth found mine again, slower this time, but no less hungry. My hands trembled, caught between wanting to push him away and wanting to pull him closer. He broke the kiss just long enough to mutter, low and ragged, "You don't fight me. I don't want to." I whispered before I could stop myself. His eyes flashed, and something in him shifted. His grip loosened, but his other hand moved with purpose, sliding down to the edge of my uniform. With deliberate slowness, he began to undo the buttons of his own jacket, the fabric parting to reveal the hard lines of his chest beneath. I froze, caught in awe and terror, my pulse deafening in my ears. He watched me the whole time, as if daring me to protest. But I didn't. My silence gave him permission he hadn't expected. He smirked faintly, shaking his head, almost as if laughing at himself. "Too good to resist," he muttered, his voice low and rough. "When I'm here with you, I forget my wife." The words hit me like a strike. Guilt twisted in my gut, hot and sharp. He was married. Somewhere a woman carried his name, his vows. And here I was, just a soldier in his tent, an escape from a life he didn't want to face. But beneath the guilt was something darker, something I couldn't ignore. Power. Because in this space I had become the thing he craved. The one who unraveled him. The man who could make him forget. His hands roamed, teasing, controlling, pulling me into a rhythm of touches that blurred the line between authority and desire. My nerves screamed, but so did my hunger. Every brush of his fingers lit a fire I didn't know I carried. I surrendered, body trembling but willing, letting him claim me with the same authority he commanded in daylight. And yet, even in the heat of it, I felt something softer threaded beneath. The way his hands lingered, the way his eyes searched mine as though memorizing me. When it was over, he collapsed beside me, his breath ragged, his chest rising and falling like he'd run miles. The silence stretched, broken only by the sound of the wind outside. I stared at the canvas above, my heart twisting. I knew I was his secret, his escape, the shadow he visited when the weight of his world was too much. Part of me hated it, hated being reduced to a hidden indulgence, hated the thought of the woman waiting for him at home. But another part of me, stronger, darker, couldn't shake the truth. I had never felt more desired. And that power, that forbidden fire, was enough to make me crave him all over again. The third night, I thought I'd wait for the sound of his boots again. The quiet approach, the furtive lift of the flap, the stolen entrance. My body had already grown tense with anticipation, lying awake in the dark, pretending I didn't want what I wanted. But he never came. At dawn, I dragged myself into line, bleary-eyed. He was already there, crisp and polished as always, voice cutting like steel. His eyes swept the men, pausing for the barest fraction of a second when they landed on me. Then his voice boomed, "Fall in!" The drills began as usual, dust and sweat and shouted commands. But that evening, when camp was settling and the men pitched tents in their usual tight circle, Captain Rourke stopped near me. His tone was flat, loud enough for others to hear. "You, from tonight you'll sleep in my tent. Closer watch. I don't want mistakes repeated." My body went rigid. The men around us shifted, their eyes darting between us. A few smirked, assuming I'd been singled out for stricter discipline. None of them could imagine the truth. "Yes, sir," I answered, keeping my face neutral even as heat rushed through me. That night, I carried my pack across camp to his tent. The others watched, whispers chasing me, but no one dared voice them. To them, I'd been marked as a cautionary example. To me, the move felt like something else entirely, both a sentence and a secret reward. Inside, the tent was larger, neater, with his things ordered into perfect rows. It smelled faintly of leather and smoke, a sharper version of the scent I'd grown used to when he leaned too close. He didn't look up as I set my pack down, just muttered, "Over there." In daylight, he was harsher with me than ever. His orders snapped like whips, his criticisms sharper than they needed to be. More than once, I saw confusion flicker across the men's faces. Why was he so hard on me all of a sudden? But in the nights that followed, when the flap closed and shadows hit us, his touch was softer than I could have imagined. The first night in his tent, he didn't wait long. Once the camp quieted, he turned to me, his face unreadable in the low light. Without a word, he began unbuttoning my uniform. Slowly, deliberately, my breath caught. His hands weren't rough this time. They lingered on each button, each fold of fabric, as though memorizing the act. His knuckles brushed against my chest, and my skin lit up under the gentleness. When the last piece of fabric slid away, leaving me bare in front of him, I wanted to curl into myself to hide. But he stopped me with a whisper. "Don't," he said, voice low, almost breaking. "Let me see you." The words weren't a command. They were something else. A plea. I stilled, heat flooding my face, but I didn't cover myself again. His eyes roamed me like he was carving me into memory, like he wanted to take the image with him into daylight where it could never exist. He leaned in then, lips brushing mine with a slowness that shocked me. This wasn't the rough, impulsive kiss of the first night. This was different, tender, searching, as though he didn't want to break me. When our bodies finally pressed together, it wasn't about authority or punishment anymore. It was about need. His breath was ragged, his movements careful but desperate, as though he couldn't decide whether to claim me or worship me. And when he entered me, when our bodies moved as one, the world outside ceased to exist. There was no camp, no war, no men who might whisper or judge. There was only the heat of his chest against mine, the sound of his voice breaking in my ear, the way his hand tangled in mine like he needed the anchor. He whispered things I never thought I'd hear from him. "God, you're too good." His breath shuddered. "With you, I forget everything, even her." The words twisted deep inside me. His wife, the vow he'd made to someone else. Guilt knifed through me, sharp and undeniable. But at the same time, power bloomed. Because here, in this hidden space, I was the one who could strip him of all his armor. I was the one he came to, the one who made him tremble. I clung to that thought, even as my heart battled itself. When it was over, we collapsed against each other, bodies slick, lungs heaving. He stayed close longer than he should have, his arm heavy across my chest, his face buried in the curve of my shoulder. For a moment, I let myself pretend this was something real, something lasting. But even in that warmth, the truth lingered like smoke. By day, I was just another soldier, barked at and humiliated. By night, I was the secret he couldn't name. As I drifted toward sleep, I thought about the strangeness of it all. That I'd been punished, set apart from the others, only to be pulled closer than I'd ever imagined. That I was hidden yet wanted, silenced in public, yet heard in whispers no one else would ever know. And though shame and longing tangled in my chest, one truth kept echoing louder than the rest. I would go to him again, no matter the cost. Days and nights blurred into two different worlds. By the light of the sun, I was nothing but another soldier, sweating in the drills, gritting my teeth through punishments, keeping my rifle steady under the captain's hard gaze. His voice barked my name more often than anyone else's, his tone sharper, his criticisms cutting deeper. To the men around me, it looked like he hated me more than the rest. But when the campfires died and the tents sealed, he became something else entirely. His voice softened, his hands trembled, and his lips pressed against mine like a man starved. The contrast was maddening. I began to notice the little things, though, things I wasn't supposed to. The extra ration slipped onto my tray without a word. The way his eyes flicked to me during drills, sharp as knives, but his commands never pushed me past the edge. If another officer raised a voice at me, he intervened, disguising it as discipline but shielding me all the same. He'd humiliated me that first day, made me feel small in front of the unit. But now, when I stumbled, he was there before anyone else noticed. A steady hand, a correction barked at the group instead of me. Nobody else seemed to catch it, but I did. And that was when I realized the truth I'd been avoiding. I was falling in love with him. It wasn't just the stolen nights or the secret touches. It was the way he carried the weight of command like a stone on his shoulders. The way his jaw clenched when letters from home arrived. The way his voice broke, just slightly, when he muttered my name in the dark. I told myself it was madness. That love had no place here, not between soldier and captain, not between a man with vows to someone else and a boy in his command. But the feeling swelled anyway, impossible to push down. One night, after the camp had gone quiet and I lay bare beside him, he broke the silence first. His hand rested heavy on my chest, fingers splayed as though grounding himself. "I can't breathe there," he whispered suddenly, his words jagged, almost pained. I turned to him, startled. "Sir, in my house," he muttered. "With her. With the life waiting back home. It's suffocating. Every letter, every reminder. I feel like I'm drowning." The words hung between us, raw and dangerous. I searched his face, but the dim light softened the sharpness I was used to. His eyes weren't the eyes of my captain just then. They were the eyes of a man on the edge of something he couldn't name. "And here?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. His thumb traced along my collarbone, lingering as though memorizing my skin. "Here, I finally feel alive." The confession landed like a strike to my chest. For a moment, my body was weightless, floating in the fragile intimacy of his words. I wanted to hold on to them, to believe them, to let them mean everything I hoped they did. But doubt slithered in. "Am I just an escape then?" My voice cracked before I could stop it. "Something to make you forget until you go back to her?" He froze, hands still pressed against me. His mouth opened slightly, then closed again. His jaw tightened. "Don't," he muttered. "Don't ask me that." "Why not?" I pressed, my chest tightening. "I need to know. Because if I'm nothing but a secret, if this is just—" His grip on me tightened, not rough but desperate. "I can't give you the answer you want." His voice was hoarse, ragged. "Not here. Not now." I felt the wall slam back into place, the same wall he carried in daylight, the one that kept his life and his soul locked away. For a moment, I wanted to shove him, to demand the truth, to make him admit what we were to each other. But his eyes stopped me, because even through the wall there was pain there, real, unshakable pain. He pulled me closer, his forehead pressing against mine, his breath shaky. "Don't take this from me," he whispered. "Don't take the only thing keeping me breathing." I swallowed hard, torn between anger and tenderness. My heart screamed for more, but I couldn't ignore the truth. He needed me, yes, but maybe not the way I wanted. So I didn't push again. I let him hold me, let him kiss me like I was both his salvation and his sin. But even as I gave in to his warmth, my thoughts circled restlessly. I was his escape, his secret, his reminder that he was still alive. And yet, in the shadows, in the dark, with his arms wound tightly around me, I couldn't help but wonder if maybe, just maybe, I was something more. Rumors are small things at first. Hushed words passed between men leaning on shovels, jokes traded over morning coffee. But they grow teeth quick. Started as laughter at my expense. Someone noticed I wasn't sleeping with the others anymore. Someone else noticed I was gone before dawn and returned after dark. A joke about Captain's pet slipped from a mouth that thought it harmless. Another man snorted and added a cruel punchline. By the third day the jokes were quieter, but the looks were sharper, like bayonets aimed at my back. I felt them everywhere. I felt them on the training field when a man caught my eye and quickly looked away. I felt them in the mess when someone slid his tray just a little farther from mine. The camp was suddenly a place of glances and half-smiles and knowledge that I could not unknow. And above it all, the captain's silence hung like a heavy tarp. He acted the same as ever in public, hard, disciplinary, precise. But whatever protection had threaded through his private actions couldn't hide the rumor mill forever. The day the whisper reached my ears in the clear light of noon, I snapped. We were cleaning gear when Corporal Hayes let it slip, laughing as he buffed a bayonet. "You heard? Captain's got a thing for him," Hayes said, like it was the worst joke he'd ever told. Heads turned. A smirk here, a suppressed grin there. My hands went cold and then hot all at once. I could feel the color in my face like heat. People were watching me. Everyone was waiting for me to crack. I didn't want to be the man who cracked. I wanted to be the soldier who stood solid, who took punishment without bending. But standing solid starts to look like collusion when every look is a dagger. I stopped work, set my cloth aside, and walked away. The world narrowed until I was only aware of the way my boots hit the hard earth, one foot in front of the other. My breath came fast, and the anger built like a storm tide behind my ribs. That night I waited for him, not for comfort, but for answers. When he slipped into the tent and the flap fell shut, I didn't let him kiss me first. I sat up, the blanket tangled at my waist, and looked at him with something like a dare. "Am I just your punishment?" I asked, my voice higher than I wanted. The words tasted like iron. "Your secret? Your toy to make you forget?" For a beat he looked stunned, as if my question had cleaved something inside him. Then something closed up in his face. Tightness at the jaw, a collapse of whatever softness had been there, and he spoke like an officer again, voice brittle with control. "You're trying to force me into saying something I can't say," he snapped. "You know the rules. You know my position. You know what's at stake." His hand balled into a fist at his side. "This isn't a game. There are orders, there's discipline, and there's a life I can't ruin." He jabbed a finger toward the flap as if the canvas itself were a tribunal. "We're not equals. Don't pretend otherwise." The words landed like blows. He had always been able to hurt without meaning to, with the authority he wore as casually as his uniform. But tonight his authority was a weapon, sharp and deliberate, meant to push me back into my place. I felt the old humiliation flare up, louder now, angrier. It wasn't just for dropping a rifle anymore. It was for being used and hidden and then scolded for daring to ask for truth. "You call this protection?" I said, my voice cracking. "You hide me, then you—" I swallowed. "You make me a secret and tell me to be grateful. If I'm nothing more than your escape, tell me. Let me go." He laughed then, a short, brittle sound that had no humor. "Grateful? Is that what you think?" He stepped forward until there was no space between us. "You want to reduce me to a word, to a coward who can't be brave enough to live his life. You don't get to stand here and accuse me of cruelty when you've come here willingly every night." Something in me broke at that. The heated words I'd held back about power and manipulation and being used spilled out like bile. "You think I came willingly because I like being humiliated in front of men? Because I like being a rumor? You used discipline as a cover. You used your rank to take what you wanted." His face went stone. For a moment I thought he'd strike me, not with a fist but with the coldness of a man cutting ties. Instead, he grabbed the back of his neck as if the weight of the world rested on his shoulders. "You want absolutes," he said, quieter now. "You want a truth I can't give. Don't make me choose between my life and my name." I could see it then. The fracture lines in him, the same ones I'd seen in the letters he didn't read aloud. He was trapped between vows and desire, duty and the messy, human things we tried to keep under the tent flap. His hands trembled. He looked every bit as fragile as I felt. I stood and left. I didn't wait for him to stop me. I gathered my pack and walked into the night with nothing but the moon to keep me company. For days I kept my distance. I refused to attend the late-night walks near his tent. I refused the warmth of his arms even when the cold dug into my bones. I laid my head on my rolled blanket and listened to the world breathe without him. It was a hollow discipline I imposed on myself, as if by denying him I might reclaim dignity. But discipline is a poor substitute for sleep. The nights were the worst. I'd lie awake, listening to the faint sounds, the rustle of canvas, the distant murmur of men breathing, the camp settling into its small kingdom of sibilant noises. Sometimes, in the small hours, I could hear him outside my tent. Footsteps, measured and hesitant, pacing past as if he measured whether to knock, whether to enter, whether to break the line he'd drawn. Once, I heard the soft scrape of a boot and then nothing, an absence so loud I could have sworn it was a shout. I would make myself curl up, head under the blanket, because letting him in would be admitting I'd failed. But his shadow grew longer and longer in my mind. The silence between us became a thing with teeth, gnawing at the edges of sleep. On the third night, I heard him pause outside the flap and linger. I could hear his breathing, deliberate and controlled. My hand was on the lash of the tent, fingers curled tight, and I did not move. I did not open. I wanted him to feel the consequence of walking away, wanted him to know how sharp absence could be. The night swallowed him up, and I lay awake until dawn, the memory of his words, and the echo of my own, burning behind my eyes. The sun was merciless that afternoon, beating down on us as we trudged through the latest round of field exercises. We were running combat drills in rough terrain, packs heavier than scents and rifles clutched like lifelines. My boots slipped more than once on the loose gravel, but I pushed forward, determined not to falter, not to draw attention. The silence between us these last days had already left me raw. What I didn't need was another mistake in front of him. But fatigue is its own commander. Somewhere near the ridge, my boot caught a root hidden under the dust. I lurched forward hard, the weight of my pack throwing me off balance. For a heartbeat, the world tilted, rifle slipping, knees buckling, stones cutting into my palms. "Fall in line," someone barked behind me. But before I could steady myself, he was there, the captain. He broke formation without hesitation, his hand shooting out, gripping my arm so tightly I swore it left bruises. His eyes were wide, sharp, but not with anger, with fear. Genuine, unmasked fear. "You could have gone over," he shouted. But his voice cracked, and it wasn't discipline I heard in it. It was panic. He pulled me up, checking me over quickly, his hands skimming down my shoulders, my back, as if confirming I was whole. Men around us watched, eyes darting between us, suspicion sparking, but he didn't care. Not in that moment. I tried to speak, to tell him I was fine, but the words never made it past my throat. All I could do was stare at the man who had held me, who hadn't thought of ranks or eyes or whispers, only me. That night, long after the drills ended and the camp quieted, I heard him outside my tent again. The sound of his boots on the dirt was hesitant, but when the flap opened, there was no mask, no wall, just him. He stepped inside slowly, as if asking permission with every movement. His uniform jacket hung undone, his cap missing. He didn't stand like a captain. He stood like a man stripped of armor. "I can't keep it shut anymore," he said, his voice low but shaking. His eyes met mine, and for once he didn't look away. "I don't just forget my wife with you. I remember myself." The words hit me harder than any drill, any punishment, any denial ever had. My chest tightened, but not from fear this time. It was from the breaking of something heavy, his wall, my doubt. I rose from my cot, bare feet on the cold canvas floor. For once, I didn't feel like a soldier under orders. I felt like a man standing before another man, equal, open, wanting. "Then stop running from it," I whispered. My hand trembled as I reached for his, but he caught it, holding on as if the world depended on it. When he leaned in, the kiss was nothing like the others. Not stolen, not commanded, not desperate. It was slow, steady, reverent, as if he was relearning the shape of me, the taste of something real. His hands framed my face, not my wrists, not my shoulders in control. Just my face, as if I were something to be cherished. I kissed him back, not as his subordinate, not as his secret, but as myself. And in that moment, the weight of rank and duty, whispers and fear, seemed to dissolve into the dark. We didn't speak for a while, not with words. The silence was filled with touches, with closeness, with the surrender of two men too tired to keep lying. His breath against my skin, my fingers tangled in his shirt. It was all the truth we needed. When finally we lay down, tangled together, I felt his heartbeat beneath my palm. Fast, unsteady, but alive. His arm curved around me, pulling me close as though afraid I'd vanish if he loosened his grip. For the first time, there was no question of whether this was real. And I accepted it. I accepted him. Not as a captain, not as a man bound elsewhere, but as the man who had found me in exile and turned punishment into something I could no longer imagine living without. I knew the risks hadn't vanished. The whispers would keep coming. The secrecy would continue. Maybe one day it would all collapse around us. But in that moment, in that tent, I understood something I tried so hard to resist. Love doesn't wait for permission. It grows where it shouldn't, it blooms in shadows, and sometimes it defies every boundary meant to contain it. I thought my tent was a place of exile, but it became the only place I ever felt at home, in his arms. Love can appear where we least expect it, sometimes even in the shadows of punishment and secrecy. What would you have done if you were in my place? Risk it all for love or walk away to protect yourself? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories of forbidden love, hidden truths, and unexpected connections.